One of the most exciting aspects of final arcs within shonen anime and manga is the abundance of power-ups and upgrades for some of our favorite characters that we get to see. Several characters receive different types of power-ups at various points during a final arc. Some have gained enhancements due to their existing powers, while others unlock entirely new abilities. Thankfully, Bleach's 1000-Year Blood War arc was no exception to this. Due to the highly character-centric nature of Bleach's power system, at least on the Shinigami side, these power-ups manifest in the form of Bankai acquisition or Bankai upgrades. Characters who had initially lacked a Bankai like Rukia ended up attaining one, and those who had already possessed a Bankai had received upgrades to their existing powers. And thankfully, each power-up that we see is well rooted within character development. However, some of these power-ups don't have as much of a narrative impact as they should have done, but I'll talk more about this during the course of this video. So with all of this in mind, let's start our ranking of the top 5 best Bankai upgrades during Bleach's 1000-Year Blood War arc. Before beginning this ranking, I think it would be an absolute necessity to explain the metrics by which I'll be evaluating these Bankai upgrades. First, there's the power increase that the characters gained from their upgrade compared to their previous one, which essentially measures the jump in power level. Secondly, I'll be considering the role that the upgrade plays in the overall narrative. A character with a relatively smaller power-up could be ranked higher than another character with a larger power-up if their power had served the narrative better. Lastly, the third metric is the relevance of this power up to the character. Bankai are fundamentally character-driven power-ups, so it would be unfair to rank a Bankai's ability without considering this aspect. The rankings will be assessed based on a combination of all three of these metrics. A character may well be ranked higher than another for excelling greatly in one aspect if it is enough to surpass those of other characters. Also, this is specifically for characters who attained enhancements to their pre-existing Bankai, so not characters who had gained or revealed their Bankai in the arc like Rukia and Shunsui. So with all of this context out of the way, let's begin the ranking. Securing the number 5 spot is Mayuri Kurosuchi's Konjigi Ashisogi Jizo Matai Fukuin Shotai. I know I'm kicking off the video with a controversial take, so let's dive into why Mayuri is in my 5th place. I'll begin with the power that this Bankai upgrade grants him, which is a bit ambiguous to determine. The power appears to be incredibly versatile and it adapts to threats based on the information that it absorbs. Ordinarily, such a power would be ranked much higher, but its function within the narrative leaves much to be desired. In its debut battle against Pernida, Mayuri uses it to create a being with the counter to Pernida's deadly nerves. Unfortunately, this is all that it could do, and it was quickly decimated when Pernida had switched to using basic Quincy arrows. The issue with this ability is that Mayuri can only create extremely specific counters to equally specific problems. Once another variable enters the equation, the strategy falls apart. For Mayuri to create a perfect counter to all of his opponent's powers, he must face off against every single power that they have before being able to counter them, which doesn't always end well. You may be thinking, well, all Mayuri needs to do is to wait until his opponent uses their full power so that he can just counter them. Now, you wouldn't be wrong in thinking this. However, Mayuri isn't the greatest fighter, and his enhancements often fall short in the face of absolute power. An ability that requires him to face off against his opponent's full power is almost a death sentence for him. Thus, this Bankai's power might not be very effective against someone who is far out of Mayuri's power range. Sadly, this ability isn't redeemed by its place within the story, as it accomplishes little and is quickly overshadowed when Nemu takes the spotlight. However, this power-up shines in how it reflects Mayuri's character. Its power embodies the ideal of a scientist, someone who studies problems in order to create solutions for them. The baby form represents the potential to become anything, yet it also exposes Mayuri's hubris, as he presumes that he can find the perfect solution to any problem. This Bankai modification is the first sign of Mayuri falling under the same delusion as Xyloporo before being humbled and reminded of his role as a scientist. Now, it is mostly thanks to this exceptional character writing by Kubo, which is why Mayuri has made it onto the 5th spot in this ranking video. The 4th spot of this video goes to Seijin Komamura's Dangai Jo. I appreciate that placing Komamura above Mayuri might seem a bit bit strange, but please bear with me. Starting with the scale of the power-up, it's honestly challenging to quantify this. Although it may not seem so, Seijun Komamura is one of the most physically powerful captains. His base strength is impressive, and when combined with his Bankai, which is said to have extremely high destructive capability, he can even injure the likes of Kaname Tozen, who has been enhanced with hollow powers. Tozen is heavily implied to be stronger than all of the Espada, making this a very solid starting point. However, following this, things do get a bit confusing, since we only see him with injuries after he had fought Bambietta without his Bankai, and it's hard to tell how he had fared against her, since most of the battle was off-screen within the manga. Considering his outcome was better than Byakuya's, we can assume that Komamura had at least held his own much better than the other captains. But this is all that we can really determine from his role during the first Quincy invasion. After learning the humanization technique, Komamura does seem to grow stronger. However, the main selling point of his new technique and Dangaijo is his temporary immortality. While Komamura was always strong, this ability adds more value than Mayuri's Bankai upgrade, combining his immortality with his great strength. I would say that there is a more apparent increase in power. Additionally, the Sternritter that he had defeated was said to be able to end the entire war in the Quincy's favor if she had only unleashed her full power. Admittedly, the narrative relevance of his power-up is somewhat lacking, but he does succeed in defeating Bambietta, but she is then resurrected as Giselle Zombie, but she does end up posing less of a threat in this form. Nonetheless, this is still more impressive than Mayuri's Bankai upgrade. The true strength of Komamura's power-up lies in its impact on his character. He had obtained the power after literally tearing out his heart in order to avenge the death of Yamamoto, which had ended up dooming him to the life of a beast. This tragic and poetic action highlights the cost of revenge and the lies that it tells. Komamura lost his sense of humanity as well as his beastly appearance in exchange for a temporary human form. This perfectly parallels Tozen, who had traded his humanity and human form for hollow power and sight. This power-up emphasizes the never-ending cycle of revenge and all of its victims, and this is why I rank Komamura's upgrade above Mayuri's. Taking the number 3 spot and leading us into the top 3 is Toshiro Hitsugaya's adult form. In my opinion, he had received one of the most substantial and impressive power boosts in the story. Hitsugaya is a very talented prodigy with numerous achievements, making him worthy of being called a genius. Unfortunately, his reputation doesn't always translate to success within combat. Thus, it was a relief to see Hitsugaya finally receive the much needed power-up through his ability to use his Bankai's full power, which was a standout moment in the 1000-Year Blood War arc. So let's discuss why he's ranked so highly on this list. First, the sheer magnitude of the power boost his true Bankai provides is the largest that we have discussed so far. This power boost takes Hitsugaya from a mid or even low tier captain to one of the best. His power upgrade allows him to manipulate ice on a much greater scale, as demonstrated when he had instantly created ice in order to catch massive falling cityscapes. His Bankai also enables him to use Shikai Hyoketsu, a technique that instantly freezes all matter after his opponents make 4 movements, and it flash freezes anything with a simple gesture. Additionally, his ice negates the power of whatever it touches. Of all of the individuals that he could have tested this power against, it was surprisingly none other than the massively empowered Gerard Valkyrie, who had to face the full force of this power-up. And this is one of the 2 times that we see Gerard genuinely struggling with a opponent's power. This increase in power, in my opinion, is more than enough reason to put Hitsugaya into the top 3 of this ranking list. The next metric to assess is the narrative relevance of this power-up. And once again, like some of the other Bankai upgrades, it doesn't have much of a narrative impact. While it is extremely powerful, its presence and activity within the story only managed to serve as a gateway to Gerard's next power-up, and that's really unfortunate. Lastly, what impact does this upgrade have on Hitsugaya's character? Well, it represents the culmination of his growth within the story. It's a manifestation of his increasing responsibility as a protector of the Soul Society. This desire is even extended to him making sure that none of the debris from their fight falls on top of the Soul Society, despite showing none of that concern in his previous battles. This upgrade represents Hitsugaya growing into his responsibility as a protector, and while it's not a tragic poetic story like Komamura's transformation, I think that Hitsugaya's adult form still deserves all of the recognition that it gets. In the number 2 spot for the best upgrade in Bleach's final arc, we have Renji's true Bankai reveal. I genuinely believe that this upgrade is the most significant power jump in the entire series. Throughout the long serialization of Bleach, Renji was often overlooked by many fans, possibly due to the introduction of cooler and more powerful characters after the Soul Society arc. Additionally, countless anime exclusive scenes had depicted Renji as one of the weakest characters in the story. However, the final arc not only gives him a power boost, but also had made him one of the most formidable Shinigami. Let's discuss why his true Bankai is the second best Bankai upgrade of the final arc. Let's start with the scale of this power up. I think it's safe to say that jumping from being barely fresh Yuln level to becoming a monster who could casually solo the Espada is absolutely insane. This power up gave him the ability to overpower an enemy who had effortlessly defeated captains who had fought the Primera Espada without needing Bankai, and this was prior to Mask powering up several times. In terms of physical strength, Mask would definitely make it to the top ranks, and when it comes to narrative relevance, Renji's power up achieves more than most. He ends up defeating a really powerful Sternritter, and he saves the lives of 2 captains who would have been killed if he had arrived a second later, and considering the fact that they still end up dying anyway thanks to Gremmy, this does take away from the narrative impact of Renji's involvement, since they would have been resurrected by Mayuri whether if they had died in either of these situations. Now this power up also has multiple implications for his character, as it symbolizes Renji finally coming out of Byakuya's shadow and gaining a power that is truly his own, and it's nothing short of cathartic seeing him fight with the power of his true Bankai. After all this time and all his struggles, Renji had grown out of merely being stuck with trying to capture the reflection of the moon, but he had then grown to even surpass the moon and reach the stars, and this is why I believe that this power up is deserving of the number 2 spot on this list. Now we're moving on to the honourable mentions, and for this ranking list I've only got one, and it goes to none other than Byakuya Kuchiki. The 1000-year Blood War arc was rather tough on him. He was utterly defeated by Asnod in the first invasion and presumed to be dead, but he had returned stronger than ever. Outside of his really wholesome moment with Rukia, he had only delivered one attack that didn't kill his enemy, which of course wasn't his fault considering that he was up against the living embodiment of overpowered hacks. But with all of this aside, let's explain why he makes it onto the honourable mentions. Starting with the first aspect of our analysis, which is the scale of the power up. Byakuya's increase is somewhat ambiguous. He had went from struggling against Asnod in his Shikai state to defeating 3 Sternritters simultaneously only using his Shikai. This suggests a significant power jump. However, while it's explicitly stated that Byakuya did get stronger, it's hard to attribute all his newfound strength to the power up. This is mainly because Byakuya had fought an enemy who in many ways countered his fighting style. Byakuya relies on the stillness of his own mind in order to find weaknesses in his opponent's offense and defense, making him highly strategic and ruthless in battle. Unfortunately, Asnod's primary ability was to strip away that calmness, causing Byakuya to fight recklessly due to fear. This provided an opening for Asnod to destroy him, even using his own Bankai against him. So it's challenging to measure just how powerful Byakuya had become, given the circumstances of his original defeat. His newfound strength only manifested as the ability to manipulate all of Senkei's blades simultaneously, which is underwhelming compared to the other upgrades on this list. Additionally, his best feat, which was destroying Gerard's body with Ika Senjinka, occurred after the Sternritter was encased within Hitsugaya's ice, which may have helped Byakuya because the ice could have negated Gerard's powers. None of the other metrics favor Byakuya either. The narrative relevance of Ika Senjinka is virtually non-existent, primarily because Gerard had survived the attack and only grown stronger as a result. While the attack looked impressive, it's hard to argue that it had strong narrative significance. Furthermore, when we consider the relevance of this power up to Byakuya's character, we come up short, as there isn't much to say about how Ika Senjinka represents a significant milestone in his character growth, unlike the cases for the other characters who have made it onto this ranking list. Claiming the number 1 spot is none other than Ichigo Kurosaki's true Bankai. This ranking may seem self-explanatory, but upon closer examination it might require a bit more discussion. Ichigo's true Bankai puts me in a unique position, as I'd like to break down my thoughts on the subject as we begin to assess this power up. When it comes to the scale of Ichigo's true Bankai power, it's somewhat challenging to determine. Ichigo was already incredibly powerful before adding the power of his true Bankai to the equation, so even hypothetically, this should place him far above almost every character in sheer power, almost because Ichigo had faced off against Yhwach, the one character in the story who was stronger than him, and we all know what had happened when Ichigo had tried to use his true Bankai. However, we can still make a rough estimate of its power based on Yhwach's statement that Ichigo's power was fearsome, so much so that he refused to face off against it and he broke it in the future. This statement comes from a character who had spent a good portion of the final arc fighting against some of the most powerful characters in the universe, and not once did he give any of their powers such praise. So while the Bankai reveal was ultimately very unsatisfying, its power is implied to be greater than anything that we've seen before. Thus, the scale of Ichigo's power-up is nearly impossible to top. As for narrative impact, discussing it is just as complicated. While its true power is never fully revealed and its full extent remains unknown in the story, it is still what sealed the victory for the Shinigami, as it is responsible for landing the decisive blow to bring an end to Yhwach. Whether its true power is known or not cannot change the fact that it had defeated the greatest villain of the entire story and thus was responsible for saving the universe, and that's more than enough plot relevance if you ask me. The next aspect of this power-up is easily the least contentious, which is how character relevant this upgrade is, and in my opinion I believe that this is the easiest metric to assess this power-up on. It's the culmination of everything that Ichigo has endured and overcome throughout Bleach, and in some ways his true Bankai is his reward. Ichigo's ability to wield this power comes from a long and arduous journey that was born from the struggle to love and accept himself as well as his own powers. After fully understanding the nature of his soul and the rich heritage that his mother and father had given him, Ichigo gains newfound resolve in order to fight by himself and for himself. And that's why I believe that Ichigo's true Bankai upgrade is easily the greatest in the entire manga. So there you have it, this was my top 5 ranking for the best Bankai upgrades in the 1000 Year Blood War arc. We've delved into some fascinating and complex power-ups, we've talked about the strengths, weaknesses and narrative impact of each of them, discussing how Mairi's Bankai highlights his scientific prowess as well as his hubris, how Komamura's human transformation highlights the tragic consequences of seeking revenge, how Hitsugaya's adult transformation is a testament to his growth as a protector of the Soul Society, and then how Renji's true Bankai symbolizes his journey out of Byakuya's shadow, and lastly Ichigo's true Bankai, which embodies his growth and determination throughout the entire series. These rankings are of course subjective and based on my own analysis and opinion, so I'd love to know all of your thoughts. How would you rank the various different power-ups that we see in the 1000 Year Blood War arc? I'd love to know all of your thoughts, so definitely share your opinions in the comments. Lastly, thank you for making it to the end of this video, and I can't wait to see you in my next Bleach video.
A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.